All right, what is up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode. We have Rayden Lindley here and Riley Seeholzer, both good buddies of mine. I think actually my first backcountry bear hunt was with these two guys, and I was out there filming it with them just for fun, just tagging along. And then since then, we've just kind of gone every year since. Whoever can make it kind of goes, and it's been fun. So, how you guys doing?
I'm good.
Doing great. Doing
Living
good.
life.
Good. It's dang, it's mid-January now. Is it cold down there?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Riley
Yeah.
works outside, so he can judge that a lot better than all of us.
Yeah.
I'm
It's
getting
pretty.
used to the cold. Now it's not so bad, but it's still cold. I mean, it's down in the 15 to 20 degrees every morning when I go to work, so that's not fun, but it makes you tougher, I guess.
Yeah. It's good for you. It's been
Something
cold
like
up here
that.
too. Yeah, it's been cold up here too. But we haven't got a lot of snow though, which I'm kind of okay
No,
with. But we need some snow in the
it's
mountains.
wild.
Yeah.
I drive up the canyon and I have to get to 8,000 feet for there to be more than a foot of snow, maybe 2 feet even.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
even up there where the ski resort is, there's probably 3 or 4 feet is all.
How do you think that's
So,
gonna affect the year for like for everything for bears and deer and all that?
no, I think that I think the winter is a little less harsh on the deer, so they're gonna have a little better survivability throughout the winter. But it's
Right.
gonna, and I think, they might not have as much summer feed,
Yeah.
especially late in the summer. It might dry up a lot quicker, but who knows? It's still mid-January, I guess end of January now, but we could still have a lot of snow come February,
Mhm.
March, so it's almost too early to say.
Oh, that's
Right.
true. Yeah. Yeah. We'll see. Um, I was kind of thinking the same thing. Like the deer herds are doing really good right now. I've heard from a lot of guys that there's a lot of like good bucks, lots of numbers. So
hmm
hopefully that
I
stays
think
up.
that I I don't know how true it is, but I kind of pay attention a little bit to some of those biologists, and they said that fawn survivability was really good last year, and it looks like it's going to be good again this year. But
That's good.
and I don't research it too heavily, but I just kind of pay attention to a couple of guys, and they're saying they're optimistic, so that's good.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's good. Well, let's jump into the talking about bear hunting. I put a thing up on my story the other day asking some questions just in general if anyone had questions about bear hunting, spring bear hunting, stuff like that. Um, and there's kind of a few topics that were really hit on heavily. First one I want to go over is just a couple guys just asked like, is spring bear hunting a good hunt for a first time Western hunter? Um, and I'll answer first, just like I think it is. I think it can be kind of difficult sometimes to time it right because later in the season it gets a little harder to find some bears. But I think that if you just do some research, you can get out and you'll probably find some bears. There's a lot of bears in a lot of the western states, especially in the springtime. What do you guys think?
I think for like the average guy, honestly, you're going to get all the adventure of not necessarily, let's say, an elk hunt, just because there's just an allure to that. But I mean, for the price, I really don't think you can beat it as far as getting out there, DIY guy. I mean, as long as your fitness and your availability to be in the backcountry is somewhat in check, I think you would be okay. And I just say that because I think bears tend to live in a little bit more rugged environment than say your elk and your deer in some aspects.
I think that there's a lot of different ways to hunt bears too, because the way we're doing it is kind of the hardest way, honestly. And that's kind of why we're doing it. We want to go in deep and backpack in, but if you're just, if you're from, and I don't really, if it's your first time Western hunting, then it is, but there's like a caveat, because if you're going to go on this crazy backcountry adventure, then I would say no, it's not the best. But if you're just going to go and find some logging roads and walk them and try to find a bear, like I know that I mean, research your own areas, but there's tons of places that have fairly easy access that are in, bear habitat that have bear tags. And like Rayden was saying, it's relatively cheap compared to a deer and elk hunt. especially if you're from out of state. And then also, you don't have to make it this crazy adventure. You can go out there and you can be closer to your truck. You can hunt from your truck. You could walk logging roads that are easier terrain, or you could make it this big giant adventure if you wanted to. But if you're a first-time Western hunter, in my opinion, you should start slow. You don't want to get over your head, and because you can get into trouble. Like the places we're going, if you mess up, you're at least a day away from help, if not more. And there's a lot of places you can go that aren't going to be as big of a commitment.
Yeah, you're definitely right. There's kind of levels to it when it comes to um, spring bear hunting, because there is places that you can go just like drive and walk logging roads, um, certain places in a majority of states in the West, and so um, yeah, I think that's a good point to bring up, Riley. Is that like we do it the hard way, and there's other ways to do it, and that's totally fine. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe one way may not be more successful than the other, but it's just the way that we like to do it. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, I think it's good.
Yeah, I would say that the way we do it, I would say, is kind of more of adventure hunting in a way, as far as like we're going for the experience, the backcountry, sleeping out there. But as far as Riley's saying too, it's just like there's a lot of ways to skin the cat, and so it's like just figuring out what your logistics look like and how you're prepared for those logistics is the best route you should take for yourself.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
you got to be honest with yourself out. If you don't have the experience in the backcountry, then you should probably get that experience before you commit to a deep dark hole that you're gonna, go into.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, that kind of leads us into the next kind of listener question, which is what to look for when you're bear hunting. Like when it comes to let's just start with like e-scouting, and we'll kind of move to boots on the ground. And I know Riley's done a bunch of e-scouting stuff when it comes to spring bear hunting, and I've done a bit as well. Riley, what's kind of the biggest things that you're looking for when you start looking for areas for spring bears?
Well, the particular spot that we've been going to, when I found that, the the kind of the first thing was like, what kind of hunt do I want first? I had to decide if I wanted to be able to drive, if I wanted to hike, if I wanted to have this big adventure. So first things first is like, what kind of hunt do you want? And you have to define what you want. You want an adventure hunt? Do you want a little bit more of a relaxed hunt where you're just hanging out with your buddies? Maybe you're from the truck. Maybe you can go to town. Maybe you can have a really nice camp. You got to define that first. So once you define that, then obviously that's going to eliminate areas that you wouldn't go to. So in our case, we wanted this big adventure hunt, right? So then I had to look at, like, because I'd never bear hunted before 2021. I'm still new to it, but I had to find areas that actually had bears. So I had to research, I saw that there was tags available for this unit for bears, and then you have to decide, well, is there enough bears there to make it worth going hunting? So then I got on Google Scholar, actually, and found some studies about black bear habitat in this particular area. And then after reading not very much, I learned that, man, this place has a shit ton of bears. So maybe we should go there. And that, honestly, it's like, it doesn't have to be super complicated in my mind. You just got to find a place that has bears and a place that you can get to. And so once I did that, then I started to research what bear habitat is. I started to research how, other people would e-scout, and I applied some of that. And really what it came down to was I found a place that biologists said there was bears, that was very good bear habitat. I found a place that I wanted to go to. And then it was, okay, now let's get into the specifics after that. So like what specific areas and like what type of terrain, what type of anything do I need to be looking for? And I learned that like in the spring, the way the bears are is they're going to come out of hibernation like April, beginning of April, maybe even earlier depending on the snow. And really, I don't even know if bears truly hibernate either. I was reading some studies about bears. It's like they'll get up in the winter for a little while and stretch their legs. It's like, oh, I didn't know that, but that's kind of irrelevant, but it was just kind of a tidbit I learned. But then it's like, what are they going to eat? That's the biggest thing. And you need to find like their most widely available food source at the time that you're going to hunt, and that's what you need to target. So I decided that when I went in and when I was e-scouting, I wasn't hunting bears, I was hunting bear food. And so you needed to find where the snow line was going to be. You needed to find where all that green vegetation was going to be at the time of year you're going to be there, and you needed to find that. And so that's what I found is like I was researching current snow levels, historical snow levels. I was trying to find live satellite images of the areas I was going to just to find out like, okay, if I go here, what elevation do I need to look at? But really, if you find an area that's mountainous, you're going to have different elevation bands, and you can kind of find that out on foot too, because you're going to be sitting in there looking for really, really green stuff, or as Josh would say, you're going to look for rocks because that's what the bears eat, you know? And it's just like, you don't have to make it super complicated, but you can. So you just need to find what the bears are going to eat because you're going to find the bears there.
Yeah. Rayden, you got anything on that?
No, I mean, I would just say that like as far as what Riley's saying too is like I wouldn't be married to a certain area, drainage or canyon. It's just like you need the general scope. So like the area that you choose needs to have all of those things, and I would say like a lot of access. So like you can spread off to different canyons, different little areas, just because bears to me seem like the most random creatures as far as you'll see them here one day and you'll see them in a different spot next day. So although you can find an area that you love or like a drainage that you have your heart set on, maybe there'll be a sub drainage, one drainage over from what you have your heart set on. So my thing is not necessarily having a single-minded focus, but more so a broad picture of, hey, when I do get the boots on the ground, like I have some options.
Yeah. I think that's a good thing to apply to any type of hunting is just have a plan B, plan C, plan D, just in case. Because yeah, you can't just be married to one option,
Mm-hmm.
unless you know there's something there and you just gotta wait it out. But most of the time that's not the case. So
And like for us too, like we're jumping in with four guys, right? Four
yeah,
bear tags essentially. If you get two bears again, I mean that's five. But it's also like having those backup plans aren't necessarily for just finding a bear. It's sometimes for finding multiple because you're and having opportunities on multiple bears because sometimes either the distance, the canyon, or whatever, you're just not going to be able to accomplish that. So also something I learned in bow hunting is like you have to find the terrain that will allow you to bow hunt something. Whereas same thing applies to bears. Like you're going to have to find the areas that you can rifle hunt these bears in. And for our case, it's going to have to be multiple drainages just because of the number of tags we have.
yep, yeah, that's a good thing to bring up. Um, there's like sometimes you might be e-scouting in the area and you might not realize across that canyon's 1,000 yards. You're never going to be able to shoot that distance, or whatever. Or there's a big like river down the bottom that in the springtime those rivers are going to be like cooking, and it
Oh
might
yeah.
not be possible to cross that river. So
Yep.
there's a lot of stuff to keep in mind when it comes to
You
that as
got
well.
those rivers get a little scary. And what's cool in
Gee.
spring is that it changes so much. Like in the morning, they're not going to be running as high. And then once that sun hits the snow up top and all that runoff starts, like you might be able to cross it in the morning and then you have to cross it in the afternoon to get back. And you might not, I mean, you're going to have to make it work somehow, but if you put yourself in a bad situation, I mean, those rivers can be deadly. So that's something to consider too. Like when we went in there the first time, I kind of overlooked that. I was like, oh yeah, we'll cross this river 3 or 4 times. And it wasn't a big deal the first day we went in, but then a week later, it was like a foot higher. It was scary. So,
Yeah, you get a
yeah,
couple warm days, and
yeah.
it can fill
So
up pretty quick.
if you're e-scouting an area and you see there's like a decent sized river in the bottom of that thing, that's something to consider. Hey, if we cross this thing, are we going to be able to come back?
Yeah,
Because it's going to change a lot in the springtime.
Mhm.
Yeah, it is.
And that's the other thing about it too is like if you're not willing to cross the river or unavailable, like in that one spot, I mean you're 5 miles through some bush to, or I mean you're climbing to the peak to get around the river. So
Yeah.
it's
Hmm.
like not only do you have to like logistically see like, hey, if I do cross this river early, because the one 2 years ago when we went in, I mean, we crossed that river decently on the way in, and then that next 2 days, just that thing filled up like you wouldn't believe, and it was a little bit of a sketchy crossing. But I mean, we did have alternatives. We could have hiked around the ridge. I mean, but you got to be mindful of those little things like brush and stuff. Like the places we're going in aren't very well maintained, and so you're going to have to hike to the peak. And I mean, we had 2 feet of snow still. The snow load was uh, a lot higher than it will be this year. So
Yep.
Yeah, a part of e-scouting is it's like one part of e-scouting is finding habitat, and the other part is learning how to hunt that specific area. And you find where the trails are, but that doesn't mean it's going to be a very good trail. Um, it might be a little better than off trail, but sometimes going off the trail is easier. It just depends. And especially if like when we went up, if you're in the thick pines and there's not a lot of undergrowth, and so maybe that's your easiest travel corridor. But then the ground's loose, and if you're going to have to side hill, then that's another thing. So, and then if you look at if you're going to try to make an off-trail route, you have to know how steep it is. Because if it's too steep and you have to side hill around something and it's that loose, rocky stuff, or if it's like a full-on talus slope, you might not be able to pass it safely, especially if you aren't experienced in that type of terrain. And then you go down to the bottom and you're going to be tracking 10,000 ticks up your back. So that's just another thing too. So it's just like, you got to learn how to, and really, you got to learn how to read a topography map and a satellite map and merge them together and then find a way to navigate that terrain because it can get complicated and it can get like that stuff wears you out. That thick brush, that steep stuff, like it's gonna wear you out more than like way more than being on a nice trail. So yeah.
For sure. Yeah. What's in your guys' experience? What's some resources to for people who don't have a lot of experience reading maps or e-scouting? What are some resources that you guys have found helpful learning that, or is it just experience?
I mean, for me, I guess it would be kind of just figuring out how to run your Onyx. Kind of, well, I run Onyx, for example. I think any of the systems are going to be fine for whatever you need, right?
Yeah.
But I would say just it's that time like, hey, I'm going to plot point A to point B in my local range where I know I'm safe. I can go to the truck, right? But I can follow this route, and if I can't follow this route, like, why? What did I come up against? But I think a lot of the times, like, people aren't very good about planning their routes, or they can see a drainage and they can go up it, or they can follow a trail. But like when you want to jump over to another basin, right? How are you going to get off trail? What topography are you going to follow? So to me, it's for me, for my experience, it's been a little bit of trial and error as far as like finding my maps, learning my maps, and I would say not necessarily being too reliant on your OnX, having it as a good guide, but like following your intuition and stuff in the mountains is my thoughts.
Yeah, I think I mean, if I look like I'm blessed to live in a mountainous region of the States. And so honestly, almost all of the things I've learned about reading the map was, like Rayden said, just messing around in the mountains, trying to trial and error, just reading the map when you're hunting, or if you're just scouting, or if you're just romping around the hills, just seeing what's around the next corner. You're just learning, like, oh, I'm off trail right now, and if you go straight down the drainage and straight up, that's a lot harder than going around. So if you look at a topo line, you can almost imagine it being a trail. Like, so if you have a big basin or a mountain, and the topo lines, they're making a circle around the mountain all the way up, right? And if you want to go to the other side of that mountain, it's going to be easier to go around than it is to go up and down, right? And that's just like a basic principle. But you also have to like say, okay, well, if I go around, is the brush too thick at this elevation? Would it be better if I like gradually go up and maybe there's less vegetation 300 feet above me, or, for example? Then I could start going around. Like, there's a lot of nuance to it that honestly, you're not going to be able to just like always look at a map and just find the best way. Like, most of the time, you might have an idea based on the map what way you want to go, but then you're going to realize like, oh, this terrain doesn't allow for it. I need to change where I'm at. But that just comes with experience. Unfortunately, there isn't really the resources, experience for that.
Yeah. I would say there are some good options for people that make videos on YouTube, or you can buy courses
Yeah,
that help kind of teach that.
I
Um,
don't. I just don't know about that. So
yeah,
hopefully,
I've never.
I mean,
hopefully somebody does.
I was gonna say, I think as far as like courses and stuff, like as far as reading maps and like online scouting, obviously you have like Mark Livesey and his Tree Line Academy and stuff like that. I guess it just gets a little nuanced when you're talking um, actually traveling the the course, right? That's where I think the experience comes in. I think that like online resources such as Treeline Academy and stuff like that have good resources to help you, and even on X, right? They have put out a ton of videos
Yeah,
that are good resources to like help you understand what some of these things mean, but like to truly understand, I think that is where your experience and your woodsmanship come into play.
for sure. Yep, I think you guys are right, and I agree. Like, that's how I learned too. It's just through learning it, and it's kind of crazy. I've realized when I've been out with guys who don't have that experience, just like how much I actually know. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's pretty wild.
And and I would say that's another thing too is like your hunting partners, right? Like I really think that there's a great field as far as mentorship and finding those guys that are going to help you get to the next level, maybe that are insane killers, right? That kill stuff every year. You can always learn something from them that maybe you haven't picked up through the years. But I mean, even me traveling with, Riley through these years, he's taught me a bunch about just like, I call it woodsmanship, right? Even like tying knots or stuff on your tent, like those are things that you don't figure out until you have to. And you can figure out all that some of this stuff online and stuff, but like until you have to pitch a floorless tent in the snow, you're not gonna understand how to figure that out.
For sure.
Oh
Yep.
yeah.
Let's pivot a little bit and talk just about bears. Some of the questions were about just daily patterns, what they're doing different times of day, and just how they're moving, just in general, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and some of this is from experience. Some of this, like Riley's probably read a bunch of stuff about this, but um, I've heard people say that like bear hunting in the morning isn't even worth it. Don't even go. But in my experience, I found bears like all the time in the mornings. What do you guys think?
I think those bears kind of love the sun, especially like I wouldn't say like because when you're deer hunting, it's like when this you're wanting that pre before the sun, so you can see them before
Right.
they get in the trees. When I think people are talking about bear hunting in the morning, I think it's kind of like the opposite. I think it's kind of like you don't necessarily need that when they're coming out of the trees. It's like when the sun is out, you should be looking because those bears they love that first set of sun and kind of that last set of sun just to kind of sun themselves maybe from the night, and especially when you're in snow and they're like diving in the snow, rolling around and stuff, they'll just sit out in the sun a little bit.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm not like a bear expert per se, but if the sun's out, you should be looking for them because if the sun's out, they're eating, and if the sun's not out, they're eating too. But you just need to be able to see them. So, and that's the thing about like most of the observations I've had with black bears in the mountains is they're really really hungry, and they don't really care about anything else but eating. So, in my opinion, if you're really 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 digging in glassing and you haven't found a bear yet, you're probably not going to find them because they're more often than not, I think they're up eating, especially in the spring. And especially like some of those like areas that you find bears in, there's a lot of these, you're gonna be, oh, is that a bear? But it's just a burnt stump or a burnt log that looks like a bear from a mile away, right? And so it's like, in my opinion, you're almost better off just kind of moving and glassing until you find one on its feet. Granted, you know, you find them bedded down a little bit sometimes. You find them not moving around a lot of times, but it's like, it's almost to me like if they're not up moving around eating, you might have better luck just covering a lot of terrain at that time. Just because if you cast a wide net, bears stand out in a big green field or a big green slope or even just a regular mountainside. Like a bear kind of stands out to a certain extent, you know. So
Well, I would even say in the pines. I mean, like you just movement is the best thing to catch, right? So if your eyes aren't on glass, like you're just not gonna catch the movement. And that's kind of the hard thing with bears is like you're saying, they'll feed all over. I remember the first time we went in, we bumped bears like on our first hike in, right?
hmm
And the crazy thing is like we were at a lower elevation than I would have assumed the bears would be at. And
yeah,
so it's like I would just say be prepared always. It's just like when you're in there for those 7 days, what else you got to do? Like you hike, and then you hunt, you just glass. So it's like to me the morning thing is kind of just an excuse for people to like be in bed and wake up later. And don't get me wrong, like I would say that we wake up later than I
I
would
think
on
it's
a,
not as
a deer hunt.
I think it's not as critical if you're hunting ungulates, just because you're bear hunting, you're hunting a predator. When you're hunting deers and elk, they're the prey, and so they're more cautious. They like that, you know, for some reason, when it's first light, they feel safer maybe, and and I don't know exactly how it all works in their brain, but it seems to me like, yeah, deer hunting and elk hunting, they want to be on the edges. They want to be in the trees when the sun comes up. They want to be hiding. But then when you go up into these big tall mountains where these bears are, it seems to me like that's not as critical. You can kind of hunt all day and you can have success finding them.
Yeah. No, I agree. We've probably we've killed more bears in the afternoon than we have in the mornings, just because like we just find them like any time of day they're gonna be out, and yeah, we've seen bears all times of day. Um, Last year on our hunt, um, like you're saying, Riley, it's like moving and glassing. Like we were in a basin, we were finding some bears, but they just like weren't really cooperating, and it was gonna be hard to get on them. So we just like totally moved one day and got up on a new glassing knob with like 30 minutes of light left, and there was a bear like right there, and I shot it.
Mm.
So it's like just sometimes you got to move and find new country, and you just happen on stuff that way. And
But yeah, and see that's a mind trip for a lot of people though, right? Because it's like you're gonna leave bears to go
yeah,
find bears, right? And
yeah,
that's hard. Honestly, like as far as hunting goes, that is a tough decision.
and it might not be the right decision for most people, really.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
but honestly, for most people, you probably should stay and try to hunt those bears. And if we would have stayed in that area, we probably still would have killed a couple bears up in that same basin. But it just came down to like we just wanted to check out some new country and
Hmm.
see some different bears, so we did. But um, we went back up in that basin, and that's where Jamin killed his bear on the last day. So it's like it still works out.
Hmm.
Go for it,
Yeah, I
Riley.
was just gonna say that like it's that's the hard thing though, right? Is the patience, right? Because if you're not going to get the right play on that day, like don't force it. Like because you will make a mistake, and I can say that from experience. Like you're going to make the mistake, and it is a lot more worth the play to wait it out because if you don't disturb those bears, you don't let them get your wind, you don't shoot at them, for example, they're not going to hightail out of the country if they don't have to. And so, I mean, they will. Bears are weird, right? They can wander a little bit, but um, from what we've seen is like if you get a bear in a drainage, like wait for the play, fill it out, and then understand how you're going to get there. And I think some of our biggest mistakes have been because it's like go, 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 where it should have been like on the bear hunt me and Riley were on, we went after this bear and we took the wrong line. Like our line of sight for the shot just wasn't there. And so it should have been let's back down and then come back up this other ridge and then see
Yep.
if we can get a shot across the canyon. And that was on us, right? And I mean, we when you're in the moment, you think you make the right play every time, but it's also like you need to have the fortitude to be like, let's back out and like you guys did, go find another bear or come back 3 days later. Hey, we found those bears. We knew those bears were there, but are they in the right spot to kill them now?
Yep. Yep. I agree. That's something I'm trying to work on this year because I'm bringing my bow, and so it's going to be a lot more patience. Like, all right, there's this bear, but he's just like, it's not going to happen with the bow right now. The wind's wrong. He's in the wrong spot. Like, give it a day or two, and we have. I mean, if you have 7 days, and sometimes it's hard to be on day two. Like, okay, we still have 5 days left, but on day two, you're
Mm.
like, we gotta go. Like, it's already day two, and we haven't gotten a chance yet, and
Mm-hmm.
it's that just comes with time. Probably it's just learning to be patient and messing up a few times. But yeah, definitely something that's a reoccurring theme in our last handful of years of
Mm-hmm.
bear hunting. So
But and you know the funny thing too is like that one day the last year it's like hey we got a Hail Mary shot. It's like we're coming back from a drainage we were unsuccessful on. We go up a drainage where we know has produced bears. You know, like no one wanted to hike that hill on that last day,
that sucked.
right? It was awful, but it was like hey we only got one more day, and you just suck it up. But that's also being prepared, being fit, like prepared for those mountains to be able to be like, if you do got to put your foot on the gas, it's like time to go, right? But it's also like early in the hunt, you do have to have just that strength to be like, this isn't right, you know. And I'm biggest guilty. I'm so guilty of not, you know, just wanting to go, go, go. But that's something that I'm focusing on and figuring out when is the right time and what does the right setup look like for the parameters that I set for myself.
Yep. Okay, let's move on to some just preparation things. Let's talk about gear. Gear's fun. I know we're all kind of gear nerds here.
Oh
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Any new gear we're running this year?
So after
Mm.
my terrible shooting experiences, I've actually switched to a smaller caliber. I've been shooting this 6.5 Creedmoor. It's
Nice.
on a Defiance action. It's a really nice gun. Like, and I killed an elk with it this year at 500 yards. You know, and the biggest thing for me, I guess, in my shooting comfortability is being comfortable. And I guess I am a wuss as far as recoil goes. I don't know, but like just being able to follow my shots through, following my trace. You know, I've been trying to shoot at least once or twice a month, which also helps with a smaller caliber. I'm able to, you know, send more bullets down range. And honestly, like from my testing that I've done for myself, if I shoot every week at about 300 yards, I go from about a 4 or 5 inch group to a 3 to 1 inch group, you know, at 300 yards, which is, I mean, laying down in a bench is a lot different than hunting. But I just noticed for myself that it's the same thing with your bow, right? The more you're shooting your bow, the more accurate, the more comfortable, the more in your shot sequence you are. And so for me, the rifle's been a big thing as far as like not necessarily getting a new setup before the hunt, and people are fine doing it, but like just for my style it seems I tried that and it wasn't right for me. So just being more comfortable with my my killing, right? The most important thing is when it comes down to that final moments that you're comfortable there.
There's something to be said there because, like, I just bought a new rifle last year, and that was the first rifle I've bought for myself for like 8 years. I shot the same rifle for 8 years, and I'm like, me and that rifle are like this. And if you are always, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm buying new gear all the time. tinkering. But when it comes to some things, like especially a rifle, I mean, you got to know that thing inside and out. And so I had that old 300 Win Mag that weighed 12 pounds, and I lugged that thing around the mountain for years because I shot it good. And I knew that rifle, and if the wind was blowing, I knew how to hold it, and and that's because I used it a lot. But then I get this new gun, and I have to relearn it, start at zero again. And I got a smaller caliber rifle last year. I've used it on one hunt and smoked a deer at close to 600 yards with it, but I'm still not 100% comfortable with it yet. Even though I've put something on the ground, I've shot it plenty of times, but I still got a lot of work to do. But in my opinion, at least for me, I mean, it took me quite a few years to get perfectly comfortable with the 300 Win Mag, and I expect it to take a couple more years to get perfectly comfortable with my new 6.5. But just being comfortable, whether that's like in your shooting position or with your like comfortable with your, the mental side of shooting. It's all like a big formula. And one of the things too is like, for me, I don't want to go into the hunt thinking I can shoot a certain range, but in reality, I can't shoot that far. So I want to kind of undersell what I can do. So I might be able to think I can shoot 600 yards and hit and kill a lethal with this gun. But in reality, when you're in an intense environment where you're all amped up, you're in the mountains, you're shooting at a different angle, the wind's blowing, all these different things are going on, your maximum range might be less. So for me, I'm like, the closer I can get, the better. And if that's 300 yards, even better, because I still don't feel perfectly comfortable past that, to be honest. So don't be too proud, get a little closer. It's kind of fun. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's a hard lesson to learn too. I mean, I've been there with Rayden, and it's like we've missed some opportunities just because we maybe just took a shot that was a little too far, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not fun, but it's also something that you gotta bring it up because it happens. It happens to a lot of people, and I'd say most people. It's gonna happen where you might get in a situation where you think your confidence is a little higher than your ability really is, right?
I
And you
think
learn
most
from
hunters
that.
can't shoot as far as they think they can.
Yeah, that's
Honestly,
true.
I honestly think that.
Yeah, I think
I'm that way.
I am too. I've been in situations where it's worked out. I mean, when we were on our bear hunt a few years ago, like I shot a bear at a very long ways and it worked out. But even since then, I'm shooting the long ranges doesn't make me want to do it more. It actually kind of makes me want to do it less because I'm like,
Yeah.
I just want to get closer and just have that like guaranteed
Yeah.
shot.
Oh
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Like,
Yep.
absolutely. I learned a lot from, as funny as it is, and I don't like watching hunting stuff, but watching Ryan Lampers, the way he does it, I admire how he there was this video where he sat on a deer that the deer was like 200 yards away, yet it was bedded down, and he sat on that thing for I think about 2 hours for it to stand up. I'm like, that man has some patience, and that's what it, and lesson learned there, dude. Like, enjoy the experience because you're not going to be sitting there waiting for an animal for the perfect opportunity very many times in your life. So you might as well, if you have the opportunity to be patient to get that perfect shot, what else, like Rayden said, what else are you doing out here? So I learned a lesson from that. It's like 200 yards bedded, you should be able to snake a shot in, right? But
Mm-hmm.
why leave it up to chance when that deer stands up, his vital area just gets so much bigger. And then
Mm-hmm.
it's 100% guaranteed almost. And so, yeah, that's what
And
I'm going to try to do. Be a little better at, you know, waiting for that right opportunity.
and I think as far as us guys that are always tinkering with stuff, like it's not necessarily confidence. I guess it is confidence in your gear to some degree. Like we buy nice gear, but it's also like we have confidence that like, hey, when your seek outside tent blows down in a storm because I guess we pitched it a little wrong, it's like that's okay. Like we can survive the night. Like, and to be fair, like sometimes that could send people home. Like sleeping bags wet. This is this, like what contingency plans do you have and bag of tricks, right? Like I hate to say you can always start a fire, but you can always start a fire where we're at, or if you can start a fire, right? Especially if it's raining, like we always have a tarp. So it's like we can always get out of the weather, but it's also like, hey, if I have a new sleeping bag, if I have a new sleeping pad, that's fine. But it's also like being confident in your ability as a woodsman to be like, hey, tent blown over, bag sleeping wet. Guess what? I got down clothes in my sleeping bag. I'm gonna make it through the night, you know. And sometimes day by day, like even if you're trying a new tent, trying a new this, like you have to figure out some of those things on the fly. You're not gonna set up your tent perfect the first time that you buy it. And so it's like just go use it. Go sleep in the backyard when it's -2 and see if your gear is as good as you think it is.
Yeah, that's huge. Um, is just using it to get that experience. I've made like a mini goal for myself this year, although I didn't do it this month, but I wanted to sleep outside at least one day every month.
You
And
still got time.
I got like 4 days, so I guess I could do it.
Yep.
But
Go sleep on the back porch.
right,
Why not?
just out in the middle of town.
Yeah, yeah.
But just for the sole purpose of like not losing that edge of it, like with knowing my gear and limitations and all that stuff. Because at
Well,
the end of yeah, go for it, Rayden.
I was going to say, me and Riley, like, it's just funny because it's like we went camping a weekend or two ago, and it's like most people look at you and it's like, it's supposed to be the coldest year of the year. Like, what the heck are you doing? Go sleep out in the snow? And it was like, we're good. We had a stove. Don't get me wrong. Like the stove was really nice, but at the same time, like we didn't have the stove. My sleeping bag and stuff was good. It was just like, okay, like we were fine. We were comfortable. We were playing cards, talking crap, you know, like and having a good time. So it's like if you truly are worried about your gear or truly worried about your sleep system or your cooking system, I'm just like go honestly go test it out because it's not hard to put yourself in situations where it's like, oh, I can bail into my truck and go home. Okay, I learned something.
Yep. Yep. Any other gear that you guys are using new this year? Maybe when it comes to camping gear, backpacking gear.
Yeah. I pulled the trigger on that Peaks tent, the teepee.
Oh,
I finally
nice.
upgraded the Seek Outside because I had that Cimarron for, oh man, probably since 2020 or 2019 even, and it was just heavily used. I bet you I used that thing for 100 nights. So it was time for an upgrade. And I'll tell you what, the Peaks tent just has a lot of little nuanced features that make it so much better, more user friendly. So I'm excited to get that thing out more. I've slept in it 3 nights now, and it's was interesting when me and Rayden went out 2 weekends ago. It was like worst snow conditions to set one of those tents up because it was all sugar and you couldn't
Uh,
pack it down. Like even a dead man anchor wouldn't hold. And so I just took apart my two trekking poles and I used all three sections of each trekking pole to make dead man anchors. And even then, like the geometry of that tent was all messed up. Like it looked so ugly, but I finally got it up, and the snow was horrible. It was just sugar, but we got it to work. But it's just like using it, man. You got
nice.
it. Just took. I mean, and the thing is if I didn't have quite a few years of experience prior to that night, I don't think I would have got that tent up. I would have had to go home because it was like I'd put one stake in, and I'd tension it not even to the level it needed to be tensioned, and it would just fly out of the snow, and the whole tent would fall over. And it took me a while to get that thing up. And meantime, it was like, I don't know, 7, 8 degrees at the same time. So I was like, I need to get this tent up and get my stove rolling, but it's just not reality. But it was fun. Learned a lot of lessons, figured out that it doesn't have to be looking pretty to still work. So
Nice.
yeah,
That's cool. That's a sweet tent.
yeah.
Are you gonna get the stove too?
I have the stove.
The
I
peak
bought the
stove?
stove and the tent.
Oh,
Yeah,
heck yeah.
dude, that Peak stove is sweet. Um, it's it's just built better and more thoughtful. So
That's one thing me and Riley were talking about too, is just like sometimes you'll find gear that just has intention, right? Like you could tell that the person that designed the stove or set the stove up in the backcountry was like, this was a pain in the ass. And so it's like sometimes that's the funny thing is like I've been trying to be on the coming up hunt, I'm using a 4,000 cubic liter uh, uh, backpack for 7 days, which seems small, right? I'm going to use a meat shelf when we get something down, but like there's a point to ultralight where it's also like it's worth the few extra ounces to be usable, right? Like sucking all the weight out of your kit isn't necessarily always the good play. Sometimes it's like being very intentional with your weight is what helps you. And I mean, you as a camera guy, it's got to be the worst because you're like, I got 10 pounds of camera gear no matter what I do. So it's like you're always just having to choose. There's good gear and then there's better gear, and just figuring out what works for you and your style is kind of what I suggest to everybody. But like, I feel like the theme of this kind of is like you got to get out, you got to use it, right? Like if you get new binoculars, got to get out, got to use them on animals, right? You can go glass up any tree with any binocular and it's going to look the same, right? So it's just kind of being comfortable, and like if you do decide to go a different route before you're like, hey, I'm going in 7 days, just being comfortable enough to be like, I'm good, we're good.
Yeah.
I think there's like a difference too with gear. Like there's critical gear that makes it so you can survive, and then there's gear that just makes it nice.
For
And
sure.
in my opinion, if for instance backcountry hunting, there's some non-negotiables, and then there's some negotiable gear. Like the gear that's gonna make it so you can sleep good, stay dry and stay warm, and then the stuff that keeps you fed. That's the most important, to be honest, because you can go out there with a subpar rifle, subpar binoculars. You can go out there with like maybe not the best hunting pack, but if you're freezing every night, like you're shivering and you're not sleeping good, you're not going to perform well. If your pad doesn't have an R value, for instance, but you might have like a really nice sleeping bag, but if your sleeping pad's like one of those crappy climates with no R value, you're not going to sleep good. And honestly, that's like one of the biggest things in the backcountry. If you sleep good, you're going to perform better. And maybe you don't have enough money to get, a really nice pair of binoculars. Well, in my opinion, if you sleep good, you can get past the fact that you might not have the best binos. Because if you're sleeping good, you're going to be more attentive. If your buddy's not sleeping good, but he's got a set of Swaros, if he's falling asleep while he's glassing, and you're looking through some cheap vortexes, you're still going to find more bears than him, right? For as an example. So, in my opinion, when it comes to gear, and if you're starting out, or even if you have a bunch of gear, if you're going to upgrade anything, make it so that your human body performs better. And that's sleep, and that's food, and and boots. Like if you got blisters on your feet, or if your feet are uncomfortable, boots are probably the most important thing. And then it's your sleep system, and then everything else kind of falls after that, in my opinion. So.
Yeah. On that note, Riley, let's talk about nutrition in the backcountry. I think all of us have also dove into this quite a bit, but what's your major things that you're looking at when you're looking at nutrition for yourself?
I'll let Rayden start. I got some opinions, but I gotta have Rayden start.
Oh, throwing me in the hot seat. No,
Oh no.
with me, like this hunt that we do, for me, a lot is calories in, calories out. Like the last two times that I've done this hunt, I've lost 10 pounds. And I mean, I've had a lot of food. Like I'm not small, right? Like I'm 195 pounds right now. Like I would consider myself in decent shape, but like I'm a little thicker, right? And so like I have to have a lot more food than you would think. And so I focus a lot on calories. And sometimes, honestly, on a backcountry hunt, because I'm going to lose this weight anyways, I don't really care if they're dirty, right? Like I'll eat some Oreos and some sugars and stuff, and I feel like I perform okay on that as long as I'm burning it, right? But as soon as if I dip under my calories, and that even means if I'm eating better food, it seems like for me, I still am bonking a little bit, right? And I have some goals as far as like slimming down some of that weight. I want to try some of that what's it called? It's like a drink mix that has carbs in it and stuff like that.
Tailwind.
Tailwind, yeah. I'm
Yeah.
gonna experiment with some of that during the spring as far as training and stuff goes. See how my gut likes it. But I would also just add to that, like right now, since I am at 190, 195, I'm trying to lose about 10 pounds before we go on the hunt, just because I perform great in the gym right now because I'm strong and whatever. But as far as cardio goes, sometimes taking a little bit of that extra bulk off just for myself is something that's, I would say, mission critical for me. Just being a little bit more in shape to keep up with you two mountain goats.
Yeah. What do you think, Logan?
Yeah. Um, I agree. In the past, most of the time, what I've done is it's just like pack the calories, bring as much food as I can. I want to kind of get a little bit better about the quality of food that I'm bringing in the backcountry now. Um, and I haven't really dove into it yet recently because we're still kind of a few months out. Um, but it's definitely something that I think about a lot, especially on the like supplemental side of things, where it's like you want to make sure you're getting the like if you're drinking a lot of water, that's good, but you also need like electrolytes with that water to help your body just actually use it, right? So electrolytes, I'm gonna be packing creatine to take every day just to help my body retain the water that I'm taking, and then just making sure I'm not taking in too much sugars is a big one. Even though we are working hard, and I like Rayden, like I don't weigh that much, but I still lose weight when I'm on a hunt, right? And it's not weight that I need to lose, but I'm losing weight when I go on like a 7 to 10 day hunt. And it doesn't really bug me too much, and I feel like I'm pretty good, but I do feel like I'm not performing at my best when I'm in the backcountry with the current food that I've been using like this last season. So I just want I'm in a process right now of revamping that. And yeah, for me it's like making sure that I'm making my food in the mountains as similar as I can to the food I'm eating at home. So I eat a lot of meats and proteins, some really good carbs like rice. So just trying to find foods that are similar to that to use in the backcountry rather than just like going to the store and buying a bunch of crap to throw in my pack and take up, because that's what I normally have done. How about
So,
you, Riley?
um, I got, I've developed some opinions and knowledge about this over, especially the last couple of years. So, two summers ago, I hiked the Pacific Crest Trail, and I became intimately aware of how nutrition affects you performance-wise. Because I hiked across the whole country for 6 months, and I was pushing my body to the absolute max that it could possibly go. And then I learned a lot. So one thing I learned is, um, and this kind of applies to like a shorter stint, like 7 to 10 days, but it really applied long term, is the quality over quantity is, it's true in a very long term sense, but in a little, like, a micro window, maybe quantity is more important. But you should balance that. So like Rayden was saying, you want calories in, calories out. That's true. You also need to balance that with a little bit of quality, because if your body's not used to that, then your body's not going to know what to do with all that extra fuel that you're giving it, right? And so, like, what I'm going to do is I need to maximize the nutritional content of my food, but I also have to have the amount of or calories. And so I've been researching a little bit, and from just personal experiences, like the timing of what food you eat, like, matters. So if you're going to climb a hill, that's when you need to eat the sugary stuff. You don't need to eat the sugary stuff at the glass and knob. You need to eat the fats. You need to eat the protein at the glass and knob. So the timing matters. So you kind of have to pack all the things that your body needs, but it's not enough to just have it all. You have to eat it at the right times. So you get up in the morning and you know you're going to be hiking straight up a mountain. You need a little more sugar right before, but your body's going to metabolize that literally as soon as it's in your mouth. So like gummy bears, if you're going to pop a couple gummy bears right before a climb, you need to do it right before the climb, not 20 minutes before. And you need to eat a little bit during the climb. And then when you get to the Grakksaw knob, your body is gonna, if you're gonna sit for 2 or 3 hours looking for some bears, your body's gonna start the recovery process right then. And so you might need to feed it some protein, you might need to feed it some fats. And you don't necessarily need to give it carbs, maybe a little bit, but you don't need to just like pump yourself full of sugar at the end of a hike. Unless you're like feel your body falling behind and you kind of learn how that feels through experience, right? And so one of the resources that has some like science-based knowledge about this is a podcast called Valley to Peak Nutrition, and he has a lot of really cool nuanced things, and you can deep dive as far as you want into that. But if you listen to some of his stuff about like timing-based fuel, like when are you going to feed yourself this many carbs? When are you going to feed yourself this much, fat? When are you going to feed yourself this much protein? You can kind of adapt that to your own body and figure out the best way to do it, but you don't have to really dive in super deep if you don't want to. Like if you take just a surface level knowledge about, carbs, fats, and proteins, you can increase your performance a lot. And so one thing that I'm going to pay attention to, and I kind of do this, I hike quite a bit, and so I've, over the past couple of years after I've learned a lot of this stuff, is I've like applied that, and there's really something to it. Is like the timing of the fuel you're having, and it goes beyond like, yes, you have to have the right fuel on your pack, and make sure you're feeding yourself at the right time throughout the day, and that's going to make a lot of difference. So you might already have the right stuff in your pack. Maybe the thing that'll make a difference isn't necessarily changing everything, it's just changing the timing. So
Yeah, I kind of think of it as kind of like in my aspect of what you're saying is it's kind of like layering, right? It's kind of like when you start out on a hike, like you want to start cold, right? Because you're going to sweat, but by the time you get to the glassing knob, you're going to be like, I'm throwing that puffy on as soon as I get there to dry
hmm
myself out. And I think you can kind of take a similar approach as far as food goes with what Riley's saying is like, you're going to need the energy for the hike, but as soon as you sit down to glass, it's going to be like, hey, if I don't eat, right, which I don't have to eat when I get there, right, because I'm pumped up, I'm ready to look for bears. But if you have your stuff accessible, throw your puffy on, zip it up, start eating food, get your tripod and your binos out, and while you're munching on some food, like you're just got to be, it's kind of like, it's just conscious system, right? And like, there's also the point that some people could eat the same thing every day, right, and be fine. Like some
oh
people are
yeah.
that way, but like I'm one that kind of likes a little bit of variety, right? Like, oh, 2 nights from now, peak coconut curry. Whew, I'm looking forward to that meal. But like, and I think that's fine because you can give yourself kind of those mental boosts, right? Oh, 2 days from now, I got some Oreos in the pack. Like that for me, a food can be a
Oh yeah.
comfort on a backcountry hunt and a mood booster,
Oh
right?
yeah.
So it's got to be some of those things that not only help your performance, but I also think like people's mental side is what pushes them through more. So
I've always
like,
packed my favorite food for like the latter, part of the hunt. The first
mhm.
couple days I can eat whatever, but I mean, a lot of this is mental. I mean, you can be in this physical great shape, but if your mental isn't there, man, you're gonna tear yourself down. So if it's if you get comfort like Rayden was saying out of food, man, pack your favorite stuff for day 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And I think that to be fair, there's a lot of ways to like do your food, and I really think that the day you need a bag per day because like I'll overeat. So like if I have a grab bag of freaking candy bars, it's like, oh crap, I just ate 4 candy bars today, or granola bars, protein bars, whatever. Like if I just have a grab bag, like I'm going to do that, and I'm not. But on the converse, like if I'm just not feeling it that day, some days I won't eat. But if I have a day segregated of food, right? And like to me, you can save a lot of weight in your food by packaging it like that, vacuum sealing it, getting rid of wrappers, right? Like you can over 7, 10 days, you can save a pound or two by getting rid of wrappers and vacuuming it and sealing it together. That's a whole diving into the weeds topic. But to be fair, if you have all your days calculated and your macros and everything broken down into days, because you got to make sure you're also eating all that food, right? Because you got to figure out what works for you and what's going to push you over the top. And if you, it can go both ways. You can overeat on some days, which typically in the backcountry is fine, but it's also the undereating that can, the next day or the fourth day into a hunt is where that's going to start to show, hey, I didn't get all my nutrition dialed.
Yep.
Yeah, you really learn how your body works if you go extended periods of time at a high performance level, like a hunt. You're gonna learn how your body reacts, and you can't expect to go in there your first time and just know how it's gonna react, right? So you have to be okay with learning, and and I've been blessed to be able to spend a lot of time out in the mountains pushing myself, and so I've learned how my body reacts, and like what works for me is not going to work for Rayden and Logan necessarily, but you can take principles from what I do. I can take things from what you do and adapt it, right? And that's just the challenge of it. It's everybody's different. Everybody metabolizes things different, but you kind of have to. You don't want to go into a hunt just eating a bunch of stuff that you're not used to. Like you kind of need to ease into some of that stuff too. So
And
it's a hard thing. Like I still haven't perfected it, and I've been trying to do this for quite a few years, and I learn new things all the time. And that's the exciting part about it too, is you're always uncovering something under the rock to like, oh, I can make my experience better this way, or so.
And I think that, like, to your point about online resources and stuff, like, you can find people's gear list and their backcountry food lists online, right? All these guys, all these professional hunters, let's say, have these, right? And my only suggestion would be don't go to the extreme either way, right? Like, don't go full on extreme, like, hey, I got to pack in as much calories as I want. And also don't go in like, hey, I'm going to eat 2,000 calories a day because that's going to skate me by. I think that you got to just find, if you're new to this, a balance in between those two and
Oh
being
yeah.
like, hey, this guy seems like he hunts a lot. He's not very ultra light, let's say. Because, I mean, at some point, all of us gear knobs try to chase that ultra light a little bit. But at the same time, like, I know that, like, for me, I couldn't perform on 2,000 calories. I just couldn't. I would bonk. No questions. But, like, I've done it. We've done extended hunts. So as far as like looking out for the first timer, I think one of those things is just like find a happy medium and don't necessarily be scared to try new things, but also stay in your comfort house, right? Or if this guy has Oreos and you want something a little cleaner, look for something similar in calories, something similar that's gonna push you that far. Get some fats or some peanut butter or something.
I think there's like in my head there's three. If you're gonna go, I mean, researching things online, especially as far as nutrition's concerned, can be very valuable. But there's also just so much weird crap out there. But in my opinion, and based, I mean, I've kind of taken principles from these three different people. Valley to Peak is probably for me the most valuable resource that I found. And then there's a lady, her company is called Backcountry Foodie, and she kind of caters more to the thru hikers and like the backpackers, but it applies directly to hunting. And then the Mindful Hunter guy, he actually has some pretty cool concepts, especially with like the specific food items that he implements on his hunts. And so I've done some of the things that he's done just on like these really long jaunts in the mountain just to see how I perform on his opinion about things. And so it's worth looking into some of the stuff that like, because he'll make a gear list, Mindful Hunter guy will, and he'll have like, this is exactly what I'm going to eat on a hunt. And that isn't going to work for you 100%, but you can, there's some, like he's showed me some ways to get fat into my diet that I never thought of before. And so that's something worth looking at. One of the things that I have, so I got some powdered whole milk powder. If I add that to anything really, like add it to my breakfast, just add it to some water, shake it up and drink it, like that's a good way to get some fat. That, and it's lightweight fat. Like fat's heavy, but your body needs it, especially if you're like me. So there's some ideas that if you want to really dive, because I don't have the expertise to tell you exactly what you want, but I can tell you who to look at that I think is at least credible. So
Yeah, I think those are all like great things. The thing is with nutrition is that first of all, everyone is different, and there's so much that goes into it that like I don't even think we even know about. Like there's so much to nutrition that nutritionists just like there's just so many like vitamins and types of things you should be taking in, and it all depends on like the type of output that you're doing and the type of hunt we're on. We're doing a lot of output, and but some days might not be as much. Some days you might just be on the glassing knob all day, and then some days you're going to be hiking like 12 miles like in the
Mm-hmm.
gnarliest country. So
Yep.
just kind of knowing your body and understanding that it takes time, but you can kind of get a general baseline by looking at what other people are doing and just learning from other people. Riley just gave some great resources. I know there's a bunch of resources online for whether it's hunting or camping or backpacking or whatever. It's all kind of the same. I mean, we're all out there carrying food on our back, and so when it comes down to it, you just got to keep your body fueled. So, but yeah, that was all good stuff. Um, we're at an hour. I don't think there's really a ton else we need to go over right now. Maybe we could do a part two or something sometime, especially when we're on the mountain hunting bears. We're gonna record a
Oh yeah.
podcast up there probably towards the end of the hunt or
Sweet.
something.
We
But
could do a little more detailed because this was kind of just a broad brush
yeah,
overview, which is good. But I mean, I guess you'll probably have people asking more specific questions about things, and
yeah, yeah.
that'll be
People
fun. So
listening, ask questions. We could do another podcast anytime about bear hunting stuff and or whatever.
I think one thing to point out too is what's like I like to observe kind of my past years, how they kind of turned me into who I am now, and then also like where I'm headed as far as like the hunting and the outdoor stuff is like we all just kind of figured this out ourselves a lot of it, right? And
Yeah,
so that's kind of exciting. It's cool to look back at the last years of hunting and just figuring all these things out as I go. And I think one of the most valuable lessons that I learned is like I'm thankful that it took me a long time to figure out stuff. And I'm also thankful that I'm constantly going to be learning every day the rest of my life. Like that's exciting to me. Learning new stuff is exciting. And so if you're a new guy and or inexperienced or whatever, or if you're just like trying to change your hunting style, let's say you're a hunter that's always hunted, tree stand or close to the road, but you want to do a backcountry hunt, like you should be excited to learn. Like don't think you're gonna just know everything right at the beginning. Like go out there and be excited to make mistakes. Like that's where like everything that I've learned that really stuck with me is because I made a mistake, and that's cool. Like let it take time. Don't try to just like don't ingest too much information. Like just take a little bit, apply it, learn from it. So
yeah, yeah. Learn to love the process. I mean, that's what a lot of the great people in the world have said is just like you got to love the process, and that process is just learning, and you're never gonna be perfect at it. So I mean, don't try to master everything at once. But cool. Well, thanks for hopping on, you guys. Thanks everyone for listening. We'll catch you guys in the next episode. And Rayden and Riley, you guys can stay on here. We'll chat for a bit, and we'll catch everyone else next week.